Debra Hartmann likes to play games.
Come on.
She was sexy. She was hot, attractive, every man's dream.
Debra had men under a spell, just the way that she looked at them. It was really something else.
She toys with men like puppets.
She was a professional at getting men to do what she wanted them to do, and she knew how to do it.
And when she sets her sights on a win, she'll stop at nothing to take home the prize.
Every guy that she touched, she poisoned.
Chicago, Illinois is a city with a colorful past. One that always straddled the fine line between naughty and nice. Just outside sits the sleepy suburb of Northbrook, untouched by the corruption of big city life.
Northbrook is a quiet, rich north suburban town. Nothing ever happens there. Speeding tickets, maybe somebody rolling through a stop sign. That's big news and big crime in Northbrook.
But its sterling reputation is about to be tarnished. On June 9th, 1982, Debra Hartmann enters the Northbrook police station with a horrible story to tell. After a night out on the town, she's returned home with her stepdaughter to find a grisly scene.
And they run into the police station, and she tells the sergeant at the desk, my husband just committed suicide. Send help.
But when police respond, they find her husband Werner's suicide seems very suspicious.
He was shot 16 times. To claim that it was suicide was a joke, really, you know.
A patrol officer saw Werner's body and immediately knew that this was not a suicide. There was no weapon present.
And at the police station, Werner's grieving widow acts a little too nonchalant.
And at one point, in the detective room, she curls up and takes a nap. Not exactly what you would expect from somebody whose loved one was just murdered.
Investigators can't help but wonder, what does this sleeping beauty know? Debra is born in Pittsburgh in 1956. Sadly, her childhood is no dream.
16 hours a day, and what do I get from you?
Your dinner is over.
Debbie grew up in a home where the father was at least beating the mother, possibly Debbie. So something was going on in that household that was obviously damaging.
With an abusive father ruling her world, Debra's rocky beginnings shape her future.
She probably tried over and over again to win her father's approval, and that didn't really work when she was growing up. So at some point, she decided to simplify the formula. What do men equal? What can I use them for so I don't feel so bad about myself? And so at some point, she said, hey, men equal money.
Debra runs away from home at 15 and works as a dance instructor, but struggles to pay the rent.
That was good. I think we're done for the day. All right.
That is until she decides to accept a dance with the devil.
Debra was pretty. She was short, she was petite. She was very nicely built.
For Debbie, her sexuality became a tool. Men responded to how pretty she was, and she milked it.
She really stumbled onto something that she could use to control men, and that was the first time she felt like she had something that she could really rule men with.
Debra drops her dance shoes and takes a job at a club on the west side of Chicago, where men are in the market for more than Swan Lake.
Smoker's Lounge was a place where you walked in, and there was girls sitting there, scantily clad, and you paid $75 for the right to go back to the VIP room, and there you negotiated with the girl what else was going to happen.
Debra knows just how to work it.
It was obvious that Debra knew how to use men, just by winking her eyes with her eyelashes, or touch your arm, or so you get the shivers. And it's like a man can melt.
She made sure that she got all the attention in the room from all the men. She knew what to say, how to say it, how to bend, where to bend it.
In 1978, when the self-professed stereo king of Chicago, Werner Hartmann, strolls into the club, Debra smells opportunity.
She learned how to shake people down for money. And when she learned who Werner was and how close he was and that he owned a business, I'm sure there was just little dollar signs going off in her eyes, kind of like in a cartoon.
A completely self-made man, Werner just happens to be filthy rich and recently divorced.
Werner was a German immigrant, came to this country at a time when people were very interested in having nice stereos for their car. So Werner established a business known as CRC, and he was very successful at it and made a lot of money.
After a whirlwind romance, Werner pops the question.
I think Werner to Debbie was a provider, somebody who could give her the lifestyle that she hoped she deserved.
Keep them close, come out, give me your hand.
I don't believe it was a typical marriage relationship. I think it was all about money from day one.
Werner has been sucked into Debra's web.
He was madly in love with her to the point of obsession. I think she probably did anything he wanted because she knew she wanted to rope him in.
Yes?
When he saw this little petite beauty, he really was smitten by her. Whatever she did, she made him fall in love with her, and he worshiped her and gave her almost anything she wanted.
Debra has Werner by the heartstrings, and she's gonna tug at them until they break. For sexy seductress Debra Hartmann, her marriage to millionaire Werner is like a winning lottery ticket.
Debbie sees men as toys. They're all her little playthings. And she is a puppet master of all these men. She's just riding the high of that power, the power she never had as a child.
Almost overnight, she trades sleaze for the swanky suburbs.
Werner was getting this woman that was beautiful, and she probably felt great having her on his arm. And I'm sure she was ecstatic about getting all the money that she was getting.
I gave you money like 2 days ago.
But sexy Debra sticks out like a sore thumb in upscale Northbrook.
I do like those dresses.
Their father may be blinded by love, but Werner's teenage daughters see through Debra's facade.
The girls nicknamed Debbie Miss Showcase because of who she was and how she acted, and they knew exactly what she was and what she was doing.
You should give me more money.
She actually came right out and said, you know, I married you for your money.
Oh, I think she was disdainful of men in general, and she'd been a user. That was her background. I don't know that there was any love in her heart for anybody but herself.
She constantly pushes the envelope to see how much will Werner take. And every time he accepts her again, it's her getting some kind of validation that he really loves her more and more.
Debbie would frequently engage in extramarital relations.
She even dangles her dalliances in Werner's face.
Debbie is a narcissist. And there is this blatant disregard for people around her, and she kind of does think that the universe should revolve around her.
One night in November of 1981, she pushes her luck a bit too far.
She came home with only her mink coat on, and her and Werner had this big fight.
Werner is desperate to work things out with his wife. He attempts to shoot out Debra's tires to keep his young wife at home. She drives off unharmed, and she isn't through testing Werner's patience.
Debbie was driving, throwing champagne glasses out of the car when the police apprehended her. She was with a well-known narcotic dealer from Florida.
Debra's playing fast and loose with Werner's emotions, and she's got plenty more tricks up her sleeve. By November of 1981, stereo king Werner Hartmann's marriage to his wife Debra is on life support. Still, she has no qualms about flaunting a new affair with a younger man named Michael Johnston, whom she meets at Werner's store.
How are you?
Werner must have felt his masculinity completely insulted at that point. She brought him onto his turf, and she let his employees see it. He was now being publicly humiliated in front of the people who worked for him.
It's practically a nail in the coffin.
Werner knew about the relationship because they flaunted it in front of him right openly and made no secret about it. It was an open and notorious affair that she was carrying on.
Seeing his wife with another man takes its toll.
Werner was really abused by Debbie, emotionally very manipulated, but a switch went off and he said, you know what, I deserve better than this.
Werner breaks the news to Debra that he wants to end the marriage. She doesn't take it lying down.
When Werner started talking about divorce, Debbie started thinking about what she usually was thinking about, that's money, and what she was going to get out of it.
In January 1982, Debra moves out of Northbrook and in with Michael. Together, the sexy couple paints the town red. Debra's still spending Werner's fortune and bleeding him dry.
I think when Werner looked at those books, he finally realized that he had spent every penny on his wife's extravagant lifestyle.
Werner is broken and bankrupt. All he has left to protect are his 2 life insurance policies.
When Debbie and Werner got married, he took out a life insurance policy and named her as a beneficiary. And it was a substantial amount of money she would get if he died.
Werner meets with his insurance agent to make sure that Debra won't ever get her hands on that money.
I gotta change my beneficiaries. Deborah's killing me.
I think the total on all the insurance policies came to about $800,000.
So if in case something should happen, God forbid, I don't want Debra having any money.
Gotcha. If certain conditions are met at the time of death, then the policy pays double.
I want to go to my daughter's. So is there something you could do to change that?
One of the conditions in Werner's policy was if he was murdered.
Werner cuts Debra out of his insurance policy to protect his family's future. Now he needs to cut Debra out of his life to protect himself. But on June 8th, 1982, Debra meets Werner at home and says she is eager to settle their divorce amicably.
There's Debbie sweet-talking him and basically doing what Debbie did so well, and that's beguiling a fella who can be beguiled. And she talks to him, she assuages whatever doubts he has, and apparently he felt good as he went off to the shower.
They agree to meet later, and Debra leaves. Werner doesn't know it, but this will be the last shower he will ever take. On June 9th, 1982, the early morning quiet in the suburb of Northbrook is interrupted by the screams of Werner Hartmann's daughter when she discovers her father's bullet-ridden body.
Tell them what happened.
Without any real evidence or leads, the case goes cold. But contrary to Werner Hartmann's last wishes, his wife, not his 2 daughters, is the recipient of his life insurance policies. It seems Debra was shocked to learn Werner had removed her as his beneficiary. So she paid her own visit to his insurance agent back in January of 1982.
Call me Debbie.
So then she persuaded him with $3,000 and her sexual favors to change the insurance beneficiary back to her name.
Relax.
Debbie considered the deal was a done deal. She had her insurance policy, she was the beneficiary. She was going to get the money.
But Debra would only get the insurance money in the event of Werner's untimely demise. Sure sounds like a motive. And her plan pays off big. By January of 1984, Debra Hartmann is living a life of luxury with Michael Johnston in tow.
She would sunbathe in her bikini in the front of the house.
She's living the high life still. She likes the high life. And she's spending money like it's going out of style.
It seems Debra has gotten away with the perfect crime. But less than a year later, her web of lies begins to unravel when a strange coincidence leads police to their first piece of physical evidence in the case. In 1985, an undercover ATF agent is buying firearms from a suspected illegal gun dealer named Ken Canel.
Ken Canel says, I had a Mac and it got away from me. He said, but it's not for sale, caused a lot of trouble. He's not selling it.
The MAC-10 is the type of gun used to kill Werner Hartmann. Could this possibly be the missing murder weapon?
If we could match up the slugs that are in the basement of Ken Canel with the slugs that were recovered from the floorboards in the bathroom at Werner Hartmann's home, then we got a home run.
A search of Ken Canel's basement yields a clear-cut match. And that's not all. Investigators quickly discover that Ken Canel has a roommate, none other than Michael Johnston, Debra Hartmann's boyfriend. With Canel cornered, investigators use phone records to connect the dots. It seems Debra hatched an elaborate plan. Authorities believe she persuaded Ken to kill her husband in exchange for $50,000 in cash. Allegedly, just before the murder, they get their hands on a MAC-10 machine gun. Canel claims he test-fired the weapon in his basement, but the gun was faulty. When he released the trigger, it kept on firing.
Ken backed out. He's like, I don't want to do this job. This is a bad gun.
Luckily for investigators, it left a trail of evidence all over his ceiling. But if Canel didn't shoot Werner, who did? Investigators believe Debra came up with an alternate plan, and Werner became suspicious.
When Werner found Debbie on the phone, they were plotting Werner's death, trying to decide how to do it and get away with it.
At least in my head, it'll be like...
He's a scared guy. And so he has to know that something is going to happen.
He'll be gone, finally.
When Debra left the house on that fateful night, police believe she set the stage for her own alibi. At 9:30 p.m., Debra arrives at a nearby restaurant to meet Werner's daughter and ex-wife for pizza.
Pizza, we should go out clubbing for a little bit, have some...
The three of them dine and then dance until 4:30 a.m.
Debbie created this alibi and wanted to be somewhere with plenty of witnesses to attest to the fact that she was not back at the house murdering Werner.
Werner was murdered between 10 and 11 p.m. Police were never able to prove who actually pulled the trigger that night. No one in Debra's circle confessed to the murder. But they do have enough evidence for a grand jury to indict Debra Hartmann, Michael Johnston, and Ken Canel on dozens of counts of fraud and conspiracy to commit murder in a lucrative insurance scam. Her neighbors are shocked to learn Debra is implicated in the crime.
I just got chills up my spine because I thought, I can't believe that we've been living so close to her, talking to her, and you wouldn't think.
In the end, all of Debra's puppets go down with their master. Ken Canel, Werner's insurance agent, and Michael Johnston are all sentenced to prison for their role in the scam.
She had him twisted right around her little finger. I often viewed her as a black widow spider that was just leading these guys down the primrose path. And indeed, they did follow.
Debra Hartmann is sentenced to 22 years in prison. To this day, no one has ever been convicted of Werner Hartmann's murder.
Probably the best thing that ever happened to her in her life was meeting Werner Hartmann. And what ended up being probably the worst thing that ever happened in her life was meeting Werner Hartmann.
I think he made the bad mistake of thinking he could tame her, and it turned out to be a fatal mistake.
Debra Hartmann has since been released from prison. Her current whereabouts are unknown.
Debra was truly a black widow, and every guy that she touched, she poisoned. She used everyone. She was a master manipulator.
On the morning of August 9th, 2002, a maid at a popular chain hotel in Tempe, Arizona, opens a guest's room and finds a gruesome scene. Millionaire philanthropist Rick Chance lies dead on the floor with a bullet hole in his chest. Police respond immediately.
He appeared to have been caught by surprise because there was no sign of a struggle to his clothing or to the hotel room.
But police have no clue who would want Rick dead. Surveillance footage from the previous night reveals that Rick Chance was not alone when he checked in. Just who is his striking Asian companion? Hoping to learn her identity, police quickly make the video public.
Within moments, they got 100 tips, all identifying the woman as Brandi Hungerford.
But one tip in particular leaves investigators wondering why Brandi was with the rich businessman that night. And more importantly, where is she now? Brandi's story begins in 1975 in South Korea, when she is adopted as an infant by the Hungerford family in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
They wanted children of their own. They weren't able to for a really long time, so they adopted. And Brandi and her brother were the two that they adopted.
Brandi and Anthony thrive in the happy Midwestern home.
Her father was in a machine shop. They were good, salt-of-the-earth, blue-collar people.
Brandi does her parents proud by earning straight A's and competing in karate.
So what are y'all up to?
As the only girl in the house, it's no secret that Brandi is her father's favorite. But things change for Brandi when her mother gives birth to her own son in 1996. He's soon followed by another boy. The Hungerfords expand their family even more by opening their doors to several foster children.
They wanted to be able to take care of kids that were, I guess, struggling with their families.
Now Brandi finds herself competing with 7 other kids.
There's this inherent sense of competitiveness. How am I going to become the best child out of this 8-child clan? And she was really trying to get to the top so that she could be her father's favorite.
But Brandi's busy dad can't always be around for her.
I think she picked up a lesson that her father's love is a little conditional. It's not going to always be there. And so I think she was also trying to do everything she could to get it back.
Brandi also struggles with having to be the older, wiser sister.
Brandi is always juggling 2 major conflicts. The first conflict is, I have to be this responsible older child in my family. And the other side is, but I never got my childhood, and I want to just do whatever I want to do.
The pressure at home only gets worse. Teenaged Brandi butts heads with her overwhelmed mother.
It was very up and down. They would be close, and then they would be at odds.
Brandi's mom needs her headstrong daughter to help out more at home.
Brandi would sit there and just roll her eyes, and there's just too many kids, and she spent a lot of time out of the home because of that.
And most of that time, she spends looking for male attention. Boy-crazy Brandi will do anything to get noticed.
She loved the attention, and if someone expressed it or wanted anything, involved with her, she would give it.
And soon, that includes taking what isn't hers.
When it came to other girls being in the same environment, if there were guys around, it was not necessarily an embracing of a friendship, it was a competition.
And I think not having that maternal love was really difficult for her in terms of having a good model for herself on how she should treat other men and how she should treat other women.
Brandi becomes an expert at manipulating boys and makes short work of seducing her cousin Karen's boyfriend.
After, I had a date or two with someone, she actually told me they had sex.
While she's turning all the boys' heads, she'll ultimately turn the women in her life away. She'll regret fracturing her female relationships, especially one in particular. But for now, it seems Brandi has developed a real appetite for being on top. 20-year-old Brandi Hungerford will do anything to get noticed.
It was all about getting the attention, so whatever was going to acquire more attention, that's what she pursued.
After high school, Brandi moves with the family to Tempe, Arizona. She gets a job at a medical supply company. But Brandi hates being ordinary, and nothing seems to be happening fast enough for her.
I think Brandi's problem was that she couldn't decide who she wanted to be, and she had never been able to clearly focus on which direction she was going to go. A nice girl who's nice to her family, nursing school, or one who is self-indulgent, gets what she wants at any cost.
Luckily, Brandi's been blessed with exotic, alluring features that can help her achieve the extraordinary. So when Brandi sees an ad in the paper for models, she jumps at the opportunity. As it turns out, modeling is a term her employers use loosely. But after all, being naughty is much more fun than being nice.
She went to meet clients, accompanied by a bodyguard, and then she would go into the private area, either the person's home or a hotel room, and then she would do a striptease.
While Brandi never sleeps with her clients, it's still a shock to those who know.
She just said, hey, I got a new job, and this is what I'm doing. I'm just like, oh, okay. Within the same breath, and my parents don't know, so don't say anything. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna say anything.
Still living at home, Brandi sneaks around her parents, keeping her sexy occupation under wraps.
I think she just claimed she worked nights. And I think she would just go out in normal clothes and she'd have a change of clothes in her car.
Every night, Brandi gets her fix of power and attention. And she's loving every minute of it.
There is a sense that she had control over these men that she was performing for. She gets to say what goes and what doesn't. And she was lacking that when she was growing up.
It's not long before her dirty little secret is revealed.
Her parents finally found out. They may have been the reason why she moved out, because they found out and just kind of said, this ain't gonna happen in our household.
Her parents are deeply disappointed. So Brandi is on her own, making over $1,000 a week private dancing.
Like most girls, she never seemed to be 100% pleased with what she already had. A lot of girls would kill for the figure she was born with, but she wanted more.
She walked in and basically just said, look what I got. Hey, like my new boob job? It's like, it looks good, it suits you. And she, you want to feel them? I'm like, that's okay.
With her new and improved body, Brandi takes her private dancing public. She makes loads of cash at a new job dancing topless in a high-end gentleman's club in Phoenix. She's finally on top. But a family tragedy brings her back down to earth in 2001, when her father is diagnosed with lung cancer.
And that's when they were like, holy cow, there's nothing we can do. Cancer was everywhere.
Brandi starts spending more time with her family.
In all the family, she knew that she was Daddy's girl, so it would have been very, very hard on her.
Sadly, despite aggressive treatment, her father passes away just 9 months later.
Her father dying was a really huge transitioning point for her where she really felt like she was alone.
With her father gone, Brandi searches for a new man to fill the void. Enter Robert Lemke, a 24-year-old muscular male stripper with a reputation for being a mover and a shaker. He and Brandi hit it off immediately.
So here's these two young, good-looking people in excellent shape with fabulous physiques. And for once, they got to choose who they were gonna spend their sexuality on. And it must have been pretty intense between them, the attraction.
But bad boy Robert's got a sordid past.
Robert was a hustler, a ruthless businessman, took advantage of anybody and everybody.
I just saw her inviting more questionable people into her circles, and she could be very naive to the people that she was around, and I think she got used a lot.
Brandi's teetering on a slippery slope, and Robert's about to give her a dangerous push. In her search for love and acceptance, Brandi Hungerford has fallen squarely into the lap of career criminal Robert Lemke. And Robert has big plans for Brandi.
He knows the type of girl to go after. It's the girls that seem like they're a little lost, they need someone to look up to, they need a purpose in life, and I believe that's what he found in Brandi.
Brandi loves making easy money stripping, but Robert has a foolproof plan to score even more cash. And Brandi will be his bait. It all starts in June of 2002, when the pair spots an ad placed in the paper by a local celebrity named Rick Chance. 50-year-old Rick is a self-made millionaire and philanthropist.
When he donated, he would always donate anonymously. And he donated a lot of money and a lot of stuff. And he would do that anonymously because he felt that the Bible instructed him.
The recently divorced father of two has a business acquiring and selling expensive jewelry. He places classified ads and meets privately with buyers interested in making a purchase. He's the perfect mark for Brandi and Robert.
Robert and Brandi did not have the money to buy this kind of jewelry. But they knew that someone who had the jewelry was just ripe for the pickings, and they were gonna rob this guy.
So Brandi calls Rick and says she's a college student looking to buy a luxury watch for her father. The two make plans to meet later that week.
She presented herself as an ingenue, as a very innocent, naive girl, as a good girl. And that was part of the allure, that was part of the tease, that was part of the manipulation. Very clever on her part.
The plan is to lure Rick back to his home, where Brandi will drug him. Once he's passed out, Robert will raid his inventory. The pair meets up as planned, and Rick can't resist inviting sexy Brandi back to his mansion to check out his jewels. Brandi slips into the home with the unsuspecting millionaire.
While at Rick's house, Brandi putting the pills into Rick's drink with the intention of Rick falling asleep, and then she would have Robert come. Well, Rick got tired, but he never fell asleep. He told Brandi it was time for her to leave.
Are you okay?
I don't feel well.
You sure? You don't look so well.
I think you should go.
Panicked, Brandi phones Robert for help.
I'm so sorry, I screwed up.
Brandi didn't know where she was in the first place to be able to convey to Robert how to get there.
You don't know where the address is and he's still awake? Come on. This is ridiculous.
Their plot foiled, Brandi leaves Rick's home. Robert's furious, but Brandi promises to make it up to him. Days later, she reaches out to Rick with a different plan in mind.
Brandi told Rick that she had some buyers who would like to look at the jewelry that he has. And Rick was always working an angle.
But he's hesitant.
He told me that night, he said, I'm a little bit worried about this date. He says, here's what I'm gonna do. I'll show her and her friend the jewelry right there in the restaurant. He said, public place, it'll be perfectly safe. So that was his plan going into that date.
But sexy Brandi convinces Rick to change that plan. They check into a hotel where she says her friends will meet them.
I believe Brandi really manipulated Rick. I think she used everything in her powers that she's learned by being a stripper to reel him in.
But Brandi and Robert's plan for the perfect robbery is about to take a very unexpected turn. Brandi Hungerford has millionaire jewelry salesman Rick Chance right where she wants him. And her boyfriend's about to rob him blind. Around 10 o'clock, Brandi steps out of the room, supposedly to fill the ice bucket. Robert is just outside. He plans to threaten Rick and steal his jewels while Brandi waits in the hallway.
Rick was probably seated on the bed when Robert entered the room, and Robert used the gun to hit Rick on the back of the head with the handgun.
But the gun goes off, and a single bullet lodges in Rick's chest.
Brandi heard a loud pop that she wasn't 100% sure what it was, but it was enough to make her want to run.
Brandi left the hotel, went to the car, and was waiting for Robert in the car. A minute or two later, Robert shows up, and he has Rick's bag with the jewelry with them.
What happened? Everything's all right.
Brandi and Robert leave Rick Chance behind and speed off into the night. When Rick's friends and family realize he's missing, they fear the worst.
The fact that he was meeting these people the night before weighed very heavily on everyone's mind. He's not answering his phone.
Rick's body is discovered the next morning by the hotel maid.
There was a do not disturb sign on the motel room door. At some point, the maid pushed the sign aside. The maid saw something in there she wasn't willing to clean up, and she backed out.
Rick Chance's murder hits the news. And within hours, police get a flood of tips from viewers. But the most compelling comes from a surprising source, Brandi's own mother.
Brandi's mother worked in law enforcement, so she, I believe she, besides just being a good person, I think she felt an obligation that she needed to come forward and provide us with the identity of her daughter. She was upset that her daughter was involved in this.
We had no clue. You know, they put it as, you know, she's missing. Do you know where she's at? We didn't know where she was at. We hadn't been in contact with her for a year.
Police connect the dots as they learn more about Brandi's boyfriend from Mrs. Hungerford.
Robert had a bit of a violent and criminal past, so everything was all starting to point towards Robert is involved in this, and so is Brandi, and now they've disappeared. Nobody knows where they are.
Investigators race against the clock to find Brandi before it's too late.
We knew that Robert kind of had a propensity for violence, and in fact, we had a concern during the investigation that for Brandi's safety, if Robert would kill Brandi to silence any other witnesses to this crime.
5 days later, after a national manhunt, Robert Lemke is arrested in his hometown of Tacoma, Washington. He is charged with first-degree murder. Police find Brandi alive and well the next day at Robert's mother's house.
She claims that he never told her that he shot and killed Rick Chance. If she thought the noise, the pop, was such an innocent noise, a car backfiring or something, why did she run?
Brandi soon caves and reveals the details of their plan to rob Rick Chance. In 2005, Robert Lemke pleads guilty to the murder charge. He'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. Brandi Hungerford pleads guilty to robbery. and is sentenced to 14 years in prison.
In this case, the one witness who could really tell the story is dead. Brandi's testimony ended up being true. And so in that case, the plea bargain process worked. It brought about justice. So I don't have any qualms about it. We got justice.
I don't believe there was ever any intention to kill Rick. It just doesn't make any sense. They were already using anonymous cell phones and bogus names, and Rick didn't know Brandi other than as Kim, who met him through a newspaper ad, so it just made no sense to kill him.
In court, Brandi says she wishes she could take it all back.
She was very remorseful and apologetic over what had happened. No doubt she took responsibility, and she took it to heart.
Brandi is scheduled to be released in the year 2018, having spent most of her adult life behind bars. She finally got the attention she so desperately craved, but for all the wrong reasons.